we are going to be talking about in a very structured and yet free-flowing oxymoron innovation, both two sides of one coin, where we will talk about challenges, capabilities, and then collaboration, because ultimately we want results, right? We want to take this further. We want to make sure that the conversation doesn't stop here, and there's a lot more that's going to happen and take forward from here. So this is how the flow is going to be, and I think I've kind of covered most of it that I did want to say with each one of you, but I'm looking forward to a great session, obviously. I'm now going to request Mr. Dev Bhattacharya, who's the Group Executive President and Business Head at Aditya Birla Group. He looks after multiple businesses, including renewables, and sits on several boards of the group. And more than that, I think, while he does all that, wearing so many hats, he just keeps piling those hats on, because he also works with so many NGOs, supporting them, giving them advice in multiple ways. And I know him for the last 10 years, and I know just how much we have benefited from you. So thank you very much, Dave. I take this opportunity to do that. And with that, I hand it over to you to please get this rolling. Thank you. Dave, you're on mute. Yeah. Dave, you're still on mute.
Am I okay now? Sorry.
Yes.
Is it all right? Okay. I thought somebody muted me and unmuted me. Okay. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'll repeat my one line that I had missed out. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and an exciting opportunity for me to get you all worked up, riled, and perhaps regenerated, reinvigorated to think about issues that are in our face every day. But often it is taken as one of those things that we all love to talk about. It's a great buzzword. It's a feel-good term. We all love to embrace it in letter, but not in spirit. And this is the nature of the word diversity. And, in most situations, diversity is seen in limited ways. Nature does not see anything but diversity, and it's all around us. But human beings somehow have decided to make rose gardens, tulip gardens, or concrete jungles for themselves. That's not the nature that the good Lord above had given us. But this is what has sort of crept into every part of our lives, and we have stopped looking at diversity as a natural phenomenon, a phenomenon that we should not only embrace in letter but fully in spirit, and actually believe that diversity is really beneficial to humankind. And I do not say it just as a matter of an emotional appeal, but what I'm saying is actually proven beyond doubt in experiments and surveys done. And one I'll refer to is one that done in Germany a few years ago, and then it was extended to many, in fact, 50 countries. And it was tested whether, am I there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're there.
I seem to have lost everyone. Okay.
Well, loud and clear. Yeah.
All right. So a survey was done in Germany and then extended to several countries. And the survey intended to find out whether innovative organizations, or the leading innovative organizations, are largely more diverse than the ones that are not, or is it just a thought, just an idea? So this actually covered around 1,000 companies initially and many more later. And it tried to understand if whether innovative environments fostered greater diversity, or were it companies that tried to create diversity in their workforce, and that resulted to making organizations more innovative. Then by diversity, we mean not just gender diversity, which is usually the biggest challenge in any case, But it's all about race, cultural and geographical and demographic diversity, people with different experiences from different parts of the world, people with experiences from different spheres of operation, not just, when you're trying to build, say, automobiles and you start recruiting people for the automobile company, the only people you recruit are from the automobile sector. So this is what also a sort of blinkered view to what works actually appears. But that's not the way it actually is. That's not what a diverse organization does. A diverse organization or organizations committed to diversity, not committed to diversity because of a legal mandate or because it's politically correct, but because believing that diversity actually leads to a very innovative organization. And if you apply your first principles, if you have people from different work backgrounds from different parts of the world, won't you have very interesting questions on the table every time? People ask questions which you would not really thought about, or they will put forward propositions which make you a little uncomfortable. Oh, we don't do it this way, or this is not the way it is done in this country, or this is not the way it is done in our company. But then when you sit back quietly and think about it, you say, oh, that was a good question, actually. Why is it that we never thought about this? And this is what a diverse organization does. It creates those environments where people question set beliefs, they open up issues that you probably have pushed under the carpet. And this is not just organizations. This is when countries are collaborating, when different parts of society, civil society, government institutions are trying to collaborate to find solutions. The ability to see different points of view, the ability to see diversity in all its ways of operating and interaction, and allowing those winds of change to come and question the current status quo and then lead into a possible set of solutions that are very different from what you initially thought you were leading into. So this study proved beyond doubt that the organizations who are leading in the area of innovation, that is in products, processes, leadership styles, decision-making styles, coming out with solutions which are very different from the run-of-the-mill solutions, were organizations which were diverse. They had actually done work to create the organizations, create diversity within organizations, within their organizations. And that led to them being the top companies in the innovation index. This was a finding that was shared in many TED talks and in many forums across the world. And slowly organizations and companies and countries, in fact, started mandating diversity. And we started with women. And unfortunately, even today, I don't have to repeat it. All of you are fully aware of this. That in spite of large changes in the educational mix and the results that women show in the women versus men statistics, and even in India, we see that the rate of success in amongst women or among students is far better in the women community than in the men's. But even then, and even when we find a large increase in intake of women in several sectors in the economy, very little actually find their way to the board, find their way to the CXO suite. So why is this diversity somehow more like a politically correct statement and legally mandated action that people do, but don't really lead it up to really benefiting the organizations, institutions from the diversity that they intend to inculcate in their organizations. This is the backdrop of the challenge that we have. So where do we begin? Where do we see the problem? What kind of solutions have we tried to work with? What kind of solutions have we been able to implement? And where have we been part of such experiments? What have we found? This is what we want to hear from all of you, from the leading experts who are now in the panel from a diverse set of fields. I'm personally exceedingly excited to find out what you have to say. And I'm sure all the audience and all the people who are part of this roundtable today are eagerly waiting to hear from each of you. So with that, I will request Anupama to tell us who's the first person that we shall invite and give a little background.
Thank you, Dev. Hi, everyone. I'm Anupama Kapoor. As you may have seen on the name and the details on the picture, I am an equity and inclusion professional, and I work with Indian organizations in creating equitable cultures. I think Dave has superbly summarized the challenges, the research, and the good work that is being done. Of course, we have a long way to go. I think I will start with requesting, just give me a sec. I'll start by requesting Mr. Iyengar from Deloitte to share his perspective on the challenges on this front.
Thank you, Anupama. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And thank you, Dave. That was a great start. Firstly, I want to thank Rise and for inviting me here and allowing me to be a part of this roundtable. Second, a good day. I figured that good day would be a good way to describe it, because I'm not quite sure all the different time zones, but good day to everybody that's on the panel and all the volunteers that are on here. My name is Vishal Iyengar. I'm a principal with Deloitte Consulting. I won't bore you with more details other than to say that I am part of Deloitte's application modernization and innovation practice. And so this topic on diversity and how diversity-driven innovation, can be brought to the forefront, and to help with some of the diversity issues that Dave just talked about is near and dear to me. I'm a technologist by trade and a consultant by choice. So, as all good consultants, I'll start with a question: does anybody, or hopefully everybody, know what is the one thing that is common across Lipitor, the statin that some of you have probably heard of, James Bond, the titular character that all of us have seen, and Sonar? And if you're wondering why those three, I'll give you the answer. The answer is that each of those ideas actually failed on multiple occasions before they succeeded. In fact, 3 times in each case. Why is that relevant to this topic, you may be asking? Well, most good ideas and most innovation you'll find has to go through almost the journey of a caterpillar to the butterfly before it can succeed. And what really helps that journey, what really helps what we call the 3 deaths before an idea can become into a success that is, the Amazon of today as an example, is different thinking, is diverse thinking, is people that are willing to actually think differently and allow for those ideas to develop. And so part of the issue that we see when it comes to innovation, for every great idea that succeeds, there are probably 1,000 ideas that did not. And I'd like to think that one of the reasons that happens is because the lack of diversity in the team that was actually pushing that particular idea, or was trying to figure out how to break into the market, or break into society, or break into community. So that's sort of problem number 1, is how do we ensure that there is a diverse group of thinkers that are behind these ideas, behind the industry, behind our little niche in the world. Take that forward to a second point. So human nature is to think about problems linearly. So I've got a 9 o'clock meeting, or in this case, in my case, it was a 6 a.m. start to this roundtable, which meant that by 5:45 I had to get my cup of coffee for the morning, which meant that by 5:30 I had to be up and here, which meant that by 5 o'clock I had to be out of bed. And so there's a linear thinking to how we go from cause to effect and to the final spot. Well, innovation, from what I see, and hopefully it resonates with you, requires thinking outside the box. Requires at some points in time nonlinear thinking. And that nonlinear thinking, or thinking in general, is heavily influenced by our backgrounds, by our upbringing, our culture. And so to add to that, most human beings will look for people of like mind, right? We have an affinity towards those people that are like us, or that think like us, or that are willing to think like us. And what happens often is we end up in this little cocoon for ourselves that is very much like us, or a reflection of us. And what that causes is a break in that nonlinear thinking. Everybody thinks in a certain way, and in some cases it works because you're able to solve problems in a very mature way, in a very thoughtful way. But in other places or in other scenarios, that really stunts the innovation or the out of the box thinking. And those 2 points in my mind, when we talk about how human beings or human nature influences innovation and why diversity is a need, are a couple of challenges that I've seen as I've gone through my career and I've gone through my growth and looking at innovation. I'll stop there and see if there's comments, feedback. Okay, I'll throw a couple other points. Go ahead.
Yeah, Vishal, I think I'll just wait. Dave, would you like to come in and respond to Vishal? And yes, I would just like to say that, please put more information about yourself, about your work in the chat box, because that will help others to also know more while we are talking. And of course, because we have limited time for this thing. But please, yes, Dave, over to you, please.
Yeah, Vishal, thank you. That was, obviously you have a lot of experience in studying these things. That's very obvious. And, you talked about our desire to be in areas of comfort. And the areas of comfort is what we are used to and what we have, chosen as our comfort zone. To step outside the comfort zone is always a problem. And that is what drives this lack of diversity, that is for sure. So inculcating diversity actually requires you to step outside your area of comfort. And I remember, I never had a woman boss in my life, perchance. It's not that I ran away from women bosses. And then I went and saw my wife at work, right? She was an IPS officer and Director General of Police. And I saw how she was managing her people and how the policemen, okay, so this is in, you can imagine in rural India in the 90s, where a woman is a boss in a district, and the guys who have never seen a woman outside from under the parda. So they are getting used to a DIG who's a woman. And you realize that, the whole perspective of the police force, the body language of the police was not that aggressive, macho, or difficult to deal with kind of person. They all were kind of sensitive. They were listening to you. And I'm not talking about myself. I was observing their work. And I could see that there was a different way that people were dealing with, public. I said, how come this is an important issue, that you have talked about? She said, no, this is what I have been only stressing on for the last 1 year, is that you have to bring in sensitivity. And I want to see how you score on sensitivity index. And I will ask people randomly who are coming to the police station for their work, etc. I'll ask them. And I will have my personal staff go and occasionally interview people there. And we'll find out whether you're sensitive to people, whether you listen to them, right, whether you spend time with them, whether you actually register FIRs. This is very, very interesting, that a woman could come and make the simple changes that a man could have done also. But it never occurred to him. Because when the man, they're sitting and discussing things, this is not an issue that comes up at all. So this is exactly the point that triggered my thinking. So Vishal, thanks a lot. And Karen, now do you want Vishal to continue or somebody else you want to bring in now?
I would like to
I think
bring Deborah in
Yeah.
a little bit really quickly because, she is both a consultant, author, CSR person who has written a wonderful book, in fact, on the corporate responsibility code book. And I think brings in the perspective of language because that is her speciality. So Deborah, can I ask you to maybe say what is it that in our thinking and in our behavior and our actions that really makes us not think so much about innovation and diversity? Yeah.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I appreciate the brilliant framing of diversity and innovation. I think that I have not seen directly like that in a conference, and I applaud that. It's marvelous. So I advise companies and organizations all over the world, and I work with a number of tech companies, and I just wanted to corroborate everything that's been said. A lot of the teams that I see in the organizations I advise, the most successful ones are the most diverse teams. And so that is absolutely true in my practice. And one of the things I'm working on is a lexicon of terms for how we can change the way that we operate, the way that we think, the way that we lead, and most of all, the way that we hire. I think the work I've done in terms of thinking about language is in one area around open hiring. So how can we make hiring more open, more democratic, more inclusive? And I think this is really a key because we have so many people who are marginalized and excluded. And we see a lot of interesting practices emerging in this space. And companies like The Body Shop are beginning to realize that when you have a labor shortage, as we are facing in many areas, one of the ways to address that is to broaden the way that you hire and to hire people that you might not have hired before. And that could be people who are refugees, people who were formerly incarcerated, veterans, a wide group of people, and to cast a very broad net. And I think that's an interesting innovation that we need to replicate. And I think there's a lot of potential for that in coding. I'd love to see that expand more broadly. Mostly that work has been in the areas of that are more low-paying jobs or retail, manufacturing. But I'd love to see that expand into other areas. And so I have an invitation for all of you to share language and practices that you're coming across that question the way that we think about hiring, about promoting, about managing and change. And open hiring is another one that I think is really important concept to bring out is the idea of neurodiversity, that we need to create organizations that support people in all of their ways of being and learning and acting. And so neurodiversity is a huge area emerging especially I think in the area of technology. So how do we manage in organizations to address people who may be on the autism spectrum or have mental health challenges? This has become a huge issue. So that's another another term that I want to bring out is this concept of neurodiversity that I think is really essential. And then lastly, a wonderful source of diverse innovation is the Meaningful Business 100. And I can put that link in the chat, but I've been a judge for the Meaningful Business 100 for 3 years now. And it is a terrific group of people from around the world, many of whom you might have heard of, but many from the global South and that may not be familiar. And it's a way to elevate a very diverse and innovative group of business leaders who are promoting the UN global goals. So that to me is a wonderful example of diverse types of innovations, as well as diverse management. And some of those innovations are ways, new types of products and services to help diverse populations. So that's another way of thinking about this. How do we use innovation to promote people in workplaces so they have more tools? And lastly, I think one of the key things I see is training. So in open hiring, in inclusive hiring, in neurodiversity, there is a huge need for training for us to reset the way that we think, the way that we operate. And part of that is through language. So please feel free to share terms from other companies, other languages for this lexicon that helps us reimagine and recreate workplaces that are more equitable and innovative. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. That was very, very insightful sharing. Google, at this stage, I'd like to ask you, you're a business transformation leader at Tata's, and you've, over your rich and diverse career, have had the opportunity to work across different sectors. You've worked in the tea industry, other parts of the Tata group. What do you think, how can we weave in the various diversity segments for innovation? And at not only how does it not help us not just for innovating for a different audience, but also through a different diverse thought processes? Can you share that? Can you share how it works? Maybe at the Tata Group, have you made some inroads into this space, and your thoughts in general?
Yeah, thank you, Anupama. And it's the first time I'm on this RISE sort of panel, so it's a privilege to be here, and very interesting thoughts from Mr. Bhattacharya and everyone else. Obviously, like most other groups, the Tata Group has also sort of faced its own diversity challenges, although it's, for many years been, I think, trying to be at the forefront of solving the diversity, lack of diversity that companies have. My own experience has been, really in two of their sort of industries, one of which is financial services and the other was in telecoms, neither of which are sort of particularly strong on diversity. I think the challenges that we saw are not unusual or not uncommon anyway. I think there was always this sense somehow that the more you start pushing towards diversity, or you start throwing it in as something you have to strive for, there was some pushback, usually, particularly from middle levels of management, about how this would erode efficiencies. A second, I think, challenge which we had to overcome was, at least from an HR angle, a definition of what capabilities are required for each role. So, in many ways, people tend to believe that the best candidates for any role are people who are like themselves. So, you end up with, you end up searching for new people who become more and more like, like a group that's already there. So I think redefining the capabilities required for each role are something that we did, I think, with some success, particularly in Tata Capital, which was the financial services arm of the Tata system. There are always, as you know, preconceived notions. One of the most common ones, of course, was to do with gender. So, there are preconceived notions about the relative lack of success or success there of women in frontline roles. There are some legitimate concerns in the Indian context about placing women in certain roles which expose them to strangers and so on. So you need to cut through that kind of thinking, and I think you cut through it in two ways. One is there needs to be sufficient belief at senior levels, particularly in the C-suite. And I think I'm glad to say that in the last 8 to 10 years there has been a significant change over there. I think the second area, a way in which we started solving some of these problems was was when we was creating new companies, we sort of forced some of our teams to very consciously think of a diverse workforce. One of the challenges that new companies face is that they're not always the first choice for people who are in the job market. And I think that was an opportunity for us to tell people, look, start thinking a little more, let's say, a little differently from before, from otherwise, start trying to hire people who you otherwise might not hire. So I think there have been some of those, some of those have been ways in which we address diversity. Now, has it been useful? Undoubtedly. I think one of the big, let's say, successes in financial services, particularly in recent years, has been bringing what you call new to credit people into particularly the lending ecosystem. And a lot of that lending tends to happen through algorithms. Now, the only way those algorithms work is if you really understand who your new customers are. If you think that the kind of middle-aged, steady salaried individual is going to be your future customer segment, then you're probably going to be losing out among a large number of customers. So I think having a diverse workforce in some ways allowed us to build different kinds of scorecards, many of which were technology based and so on, which we wouldn't have been able to, which I think most companies in that space wouldn't have been able to do if they simply had the same, let's say, credit workforce that they had in the past. So I think diversity is an issue to do with, of course, gender, but it's also to do with, I think, the social class that you're dealing with, the kind of people that you're hiring. The increased democratization, I think, of aspiration is another reason why it's important to have a very diverse sort of group, because only then will people kind of figure out what customers really are really looking for. Another area, I think, which in my post sort of Tata life I've been exposed to is ESG and sustainability. There is a very clear difference between the way people, typically millennials, tend to view this, and therefore, if you're looking at, let's say, businesses to do with, just to take an example, electric vehicles, for instance, if you don't have younger people over there, your views on how much investment to make and so on tend to be quite different. So I think these are some of the different, both the challenges and some of the, let's say, advantages that at least I've seen within the Tata system of having a workforce that is adequately diverse. I mean, you can talk about this forever, but some of these are just top of the mind thoughts that I thought I'd share.
Great. Thanks, Govind. I just want to come in, if I may, Anupama and Dev, if you don't mind, because, one of the things that is the theme is about time to change. And I think both Govind and Deborah kind of alluded to this thing of language and, AI because of the biases that we have, right? And do you think that this is what maybe is really the time to change from DNI to IND? Because the way we tend to think about diversity is diversity and inclusion. The word diversity is always kind of associated with inclusion. And I think somewhere, and this is where I guess, like I said, what Deborah's work she's doing, I feel really is very, very important, because if we constantly think of diversity as something to do with inclusion, it'll always be about that compliance, and it'll always be about, okay, we have to do it. And it's it'll always be a checklist. But if we start associating diversity with innovation and say that it is the driver of innovation, right? And if you want innovation in your organizations, then perhaps we need to change from DNI to IND. That because I want innovation, I need to get diversity. I think if that kind of a mindset starts coming in, do we think that will change the way people think, the way people do and act and take decisions above all? Because we have some very senior people sitting over here. I mean, would that change the way you take those decisions? Is really a question I want to pose at this point as well, if that's all right. And of course, anyone can pick that up, starting with Dave as well.
Yes, Kiran, I absolutely agree with you. Which is why I think the whole subject matter of today's roundtable is exactly that. And what are the ways that we can test this actually out, so that we don't have to hear someone and say, okay, he's saying or she's saying, so therefore maybe it may be right, let's try. I'm saying maybe this is an opportunity to get together with the government and use media. I would in fact go a step further and say that I will probably commit that I will get some media programs going, some programs going on television where we will invite people from institutions, public sector and private both, and we will debate this issue that do you actually see greater innovation in situations where diversity has actually, meditatively been done or actually accidentally happened, but nevertheless, can you give us examples, work on something and come and debate it out in a panel? And we will try and create some energy around this thinking that you actually can associate innovation with diversity, and let's work on it from that point of view of conviction.
Wow.
Something like that.
Yeah, that would be really an amazing outcome from this conversation, because we can see that, people do understand the value and want to do something about it, but somewhere it just kind of falls short because you're trying to push a business case. And I think that's what Govind also mentioned, like, especially in sectors where you don't see that happening. How do you really create a business case out of it to make it a thing? So talking about business cases, I'm thinking maybe we can ask Khadija to join us, from an academic perspective of what is really being taught about innovation, and does diversity ever figure when we talk about innovation at that time? Khadija, over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everybody. My name is Khadija. I'm a senior lecturer from Asia School of Business from KL, Malaysia. It's already nighttime here. So good evening, good day, good morning to everyone. So from my faculty, I am an action learning faculty. So we are a business school in Kuala Lumpur. We are in collaboration with the Central Bank of Malaysia, as well as MIT Sloan School of Management. So replicating what MIT is doing with their students is the component of action learning with our students, and our students are MBA students. So from what Mr. Dave, Mr. Vishal, and Ms. Deborah was talking about, there is this literature studies that have been done in the past, even anecdotal observations about innovative organizations, actually diverse organizations may actually lead to innovations, and then innovations which are non-linear, as well as how do we identify problems, how do we find solutions and things like that. So 7 years ago, when the school was established, we took all of this literature and all of these questions, and we wanted to test it out. We wanted to experiment with it from not just the academic side, but also in collaboration with the industry. So all of the things that I've heard so far jive really, really well in leading towards solutions. So what we do is the active experiential learning. And coming from the academic world, we use a lot of business tools, business research methods, a lot of framework, and then we send our experts, our faculty advisors, our business coaches, our students to the real world, and we see all of these problems. So something from a problem that Mr. Govind was mentioning, that challenges of new companies that they don't, they're not the top choice of employees, they're not the top choice of consumers. All of this we took into our projects. So we found that a lot of solutions do come from very diverse groups. And diverse groups go beyond cosmetics, makeup of the group. So when we're talking about students, yes, we do have international students. We have representatives of male and female. We have healthy balance between both genders. We have faculty advisors from many different backgrounds. They're not just business faculty. They're not just management professors. Myself, I'm a historian. I have a PhD in history and civilizations, yet I work in a business school. So these sorts of diversity of thoughts is beyond diversity and inclusivity of the cosmetic part. However, we did find that to start with D&I is important. To have that sort of inclusivity in terms of cosmetic makeup is very, very important. Without that as a starting point, it's quite difficult to jump into diversity of thoughts, to jump into neurodiversity, as well as inclusive hiring, inclusive hiring, training, and all sorts of those things. So we do find that D&I is a good beginning. And when we do have diversity in terms of representation, people from multi-ethnic groups, from different countries, from different culture and faith and expressions, we have representations in the table. So a lot of framework, ideas, reiteration of ideas do get heard, and a lot of creativity and innovative ideas do get tested and experimented on. So in the past 7 years, we've gone through so many sustainability projects and issues, something that is from oil palm industry with a lot of vulnerable groups at the end of the value chain that we have addressed due to innovative ideas, which included diversity of thoughts and diversity and inclusivity in terms of the cosmetic makeup of the groups of students as well as the faculty. And then coming to what Mr. Dave and Karen was mentioning just now about getting together. So we are also in the midst of testing this out as I'm speaking. In Asia School of Business, we are using this Delphi method or the Delphi method, where we put academia people, industry people, government representative, government agencies such as GLC multinational companies, as well as media together in one room. So these are all panels of people of different backgrounds, different stakes, but before they come together in one room, they all have heard of what they could offer and how they could meet the other party halfway. So there are a lot of different groups that would talk before they meet together. Like for example, Karen was mentioning the smaller circle, the bigger circle. So the smaller circle would have met first, and then they would go to meet in one big room, and then they would hear what they could offer, how they could meet each other halfway. So right now we are in the midst of trying to build a nation in terms of the bottom 40 population in Malaysia. And we need everybody to be on the same page. We cannot just have the NGOs. We cannot just have the academia. We cannot just have the industry. We need the government. We need the media. We need the whole village. So from what we are experimenting, at least at a very young age of 7 years old, diversity in all sorts of definition really do help innovation. And then collaboration of many different angles, many different experts, the way that we are doing right now actually do work. Thank you. Comments or questions?
Thank you so much, Khadija. That's very interesting. And it looks like it should not be very difficult to replicate some of these methodologies in our work scenarios as well. And I think that's one of the beauties of this summit and how we can quickly share best practices. So thank you for that. Ellen, I want to ask you at this stage, you're also, you're in a University of Social Sciences and in an entrepreneurship environment. When we speak of diversity and innovation, entrepreneurship has a huge stake. What is your take on this whole topic?
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm Ellen, the head of the entrepreneurship program at Singapore University of Social Science. So in the past 5 years, we have groomed more than 70 startups, more than 30% get funded. We also have a regional component where we have a regional impact startup challenge that is like a business model challenge where different teams come together from different countries in ASEAN, China, and India. So we have also seen our fair share of what works and what doesn't work. And I must also second what Mrs. Hadia said, that the academic research is quite clear that it's called the paradox of boundaries. I've shared the article as well from a Harvard professor, which is really interesting. It says that breakthrough innovations can only happen in diverse teams. However, the more diverse a team gets, the higher the likelihood of failure. So why is that? Because usually of conflict. And conflict can happen due to multiple issues. One is language. Another one is demographic diversity. We have also different disciplines. So we have multidisciplinary people, and different disciplines usually have different lingo and different ideas also around a certain topic. We have also different cultural norms or distance, which used to be a problem, physical distance. I think now with COVID, we all have learned how to collaborate virtually. So I think what we can see also from the past, 70 startup teams that we groomed, is that diversity has to be managed. If it doesn't manage, it's highly likely that the team falls apart. And what we are trying to do is the very early stage, we are trying to expose our students to the region, because we have seen that we have to overcome certain stereotypes, fears, and to help them really manage that conflict that is going to arise in any diverse team, right? So we are bringing them out into the region, and every time our students go into a course, they have to form a team with a very diverse group of people. So there's always one Singaporean, one Chinese, one Indian, and a student from ASEAN, and together they have to come up with new ideas. But interestingly, what we have seen, although it's meant to be very, very hard on them, because they have to deal with a lot of conflicts within the team, we have seen that actually the ideas that come out of these groups are always more, let's say, I wouldn't really say the word innovative, because for student entrepreneurship, I must say we haven't had breakthrough on innovations yet, but they are in a way unique, because I think they all learn how to think beyond their boundaries, and especially Singapore is so small, right? The market opportunities are tiny, so we need them to think bigger and to think regional, and what type of problems are regional problems, so that we don't solve something that is only a problem in Singapore and cannot scale, right? So it's interesting, really, when they come together, how then their mindset really changes, and it broadens up opportunities, and they can identify really problems that are regional problems, and then they're trying to solve it together. However, we really saw at the same, at the other side of the coin, is that if diversity is not managed, it's doomed to fail. And these are, for example, I had a student. He was having his own startup. He was looking for a tech CTO, because he had a conflict with the current one. They kind of split. Co-founder issues is one of the top. Is one of the most critical problems in any startup, really, at an early stage. So they split up, and he was looking for a new tech CTO. And I suggested him, because we have a country manager in Vietnam, why don't you look at connections that we have that we can provide there? And you work with a Vietnamese tech co-founder. And he himself was Singaporean. And he looked at me and he couldn't believe the fact that, how can I even suggest to him to have a Vietnamese co-founder, because he thought it's so different. I will have language problems. I will have these problems. He could only think about the problems that he could not imagine that it can solve his problem, and that made me realize, really, that at the stage where we are, at very early stage student entrepreneurship, we need to overcome these stereotypes and these fears and these really misunderstandings, I think, about different people. And I hope if we can do that at an early stage, that we expose young people to different countries or different diversity in any sense, really, that they learn to work with each other and be able to manage then conflicts better. And that usually what also the academic world, I think, is showing us will lead to higher likelihood of success when it comes to breakthrough innovations. Yeah.
Thank you, Ellen. I think this is conflict management with people from different backgrounds, etc., is something we don't speak about enough in diversity and inclusion, and I think it's a very critical point. Now, in the interest of point, I want to jump to ask Dave to bring in Debanjan, but I would not be doing justice to this discussion if I don't take a minute of more of your time, Govind, and if you can throw some light on your experience of innovation with diversity in the fintech space that you're working in and investing in right now.
Okay, thank you. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, the fintech space is itself, only 7 or 8 years old, and yet has made quite a difference, particularly in bringing in underserved people. So to sort of put it in a nutshell, those of us who've been to sort of Indian bank branches and so on will realize that there's a large class of Indians who feel uncomfortable sort of in the physical presence of a bank branch. Frequently don't get treated particularly well by the banking staff and so on. And that covers, unfortunately, maybe 60-70% of people in the country. So in that sense, fintech has been extremely useful in reaching out directly to people. But the challenge, of course, is if you need to reach out to people who are different from the current customer base, how do you understand who those people are? And I think that's where the need for a very diverse workforce is coming. So I'll give you another example, which is very live at the moment. As you know, in India, in many cities, auto rickshaws, for instance, are a large means of transport. And there's a significant move these days, supported by government, of people moving to become electric auto rickshaw drivers. It makes a lot of economic sense, but it requires upfront investment. Now, if you want to lend into that sort of group, you need a very different kind of staff. People who've been sitting in bank branches and so on, lending, as I mentioned earlier, to people who work in sort of white-collar jobs and so on, are not going to be particularly well suited to that. So I think that in the fintech space, through reaching out to people, or you have the ability to reach out to people that you didn't otherwise reach out to, but you therefore need people who are very different in their thinking. I think it's now well acknowledged, actually, that people really don't hire those who have, old world skill sets for fintech. It's reached that point, unless, of course, people demonstrate that they're prepared to change. I think another area in fintech, again, where I think diversity has helped, has been on the investing side, for instance, where, again, there were certain old-fashioned ways of investing, usually sort of physical relationship managers who came and sort of met you and sort of made recommendations where to invest and all that. And I think that, bringing in people, particularly of a certain age group, has, I think, and a certain mindset has, I think, enabled a number of companies to what they sort of loosely call robo-advisory. Has enabled them to create robo-advisory ways of investing. Now, if you think 15 or 20 years ago, it would be sort of remarkable if people invested $50,000 or $100,000 online. But it seems quite normal now. If we had asked a previous generation to make these investments on an online, through an online broker, someone they never met, they would almost never have done it. Now, you firstly have customers who are different, and therefore, to understand customers who are different, you need staff who are different and who will create, let's say, what they call user interfaces and so on, which suit the kind of customers who are prepared to take these kind of risks. So I think these are a couple of the examples that I think obviously come to mind in fintech.
Thank you, Govind. Dave, if I may ask you to now bring in.
Dave, just before you do that, if I might just take one more second of time, we've actually come midway into our conversation. So we've really got the next stage that we need to really start focusing on the capabilities and the collaboration pieces. So I'd request everybody should start now thinking more from, solutions and opportunities for partnership, models, framework. We also, kind of heard about student entrepreneurship, and we have student entrepreneurs right here in the group, Savita, Philip over here, and Perry, who's joining us from Hong Kong, who's doing a lot in that space. So we will be bringing you in very quickly to hear from you all as well. So start your thinking caps on, and remember to focus on now capabilities and collaboration, because we want to way forward from here. Yeah. So Dave, over to you, and then of course Devachan, as you.
Yes, so we have had a lot of interesting perspectives from Deborah from Govind, then Deborah, then we've had Dr. Hadija, Ellen, and new perspectives have emerged on experiments they're doing and work they're doing, and areas of focus from open hiring to neurodiversity to Govind's redefining capabilities and financial inclusion. And particularly interesting was Dr. Hadija's Delphi method of involving different segments of society and government and organizations to solve difficult problems. And I think that's a very important collaboration tool, and that's something that we need to think about. Ellen, of course, threw a cat amongst the pigeons, if I may say, saying that, talking about the paradox of boundaries, and that too much diversity may be a problem and we need to manage it, which is true. There's no question. But then, we get into a little more detail about what is the kind of diversity that we really allow in the organizations, right? Now, there are some mandated diversities like reservations in the Indian government, right? So you perforce, you have to recruit a certain number of people from certain ethnic backgrounds or from certain castes, etc., and you have to give them reservation in jobs and schools and colleges and things like that. Does that actually lead to that integrative, diversified, organic body that we think will be the source of innovation? Now, the point is, it is not only a mandated number or a mandated diktat from the government. It is what each one of us have to believe. And I think when we're talking about actual solutions, etc., how do we get people to actually believe that diversity is indeed good? It's not just feel good. And that's where we want to segue into now and talk about, what have people done to actually bring in an element of diversity? What is the experience that they have had? And from that point of view, I want to bring Debanjan in from British Council. And it's very engaging and a very powerful researcher, if I may say so. I have met him for a very short time, but I can see the potential that he promises. So over to you, Debanjan.
Hi, thank you, Dave, and thank you, everyone. Can you hear me all right? I just wanted to check the quality of the audio.
So far, yes.
All good.
Hi. Thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating. It's my first experience of speaking at the RISE Summit. The quality of speakers and the quality of content has been absolutely fascinating. And before I kind of dive into the topic I'd like to talk about, which is quite an innovative, diverse research that the British Council commissioned a year or so back, a couple of years back. It just feels a year or so back because of the difficult times we're living through. I just wanted to comment on some of the things that's already been said. Govind, I was really fascinated by your perspectives on diversity from your businesses, your domain expertise perspective. And the question of diversity of workforce really matters to many organizations. I'm one of the 12 members of our global anti-racism task force. And when we looked at the issues in India, we realized that in India, one of the issues is around how overwhelmingly, upper caste our workforce is, upper caste Hindu. And we are trying to sort of address those issues, not specifically from the perspective of, positive discrimination or reservation, as they've mentioned. But, are there things we can do which is within our gift, which doesn't create more integrational issues or get into more representative politics domain? I think that's really fascinating from our side. So the research I wanted to share with you here is a creative economy impact of the Durga Puja festival. And I'll explain that in a bit to participants who are not familiar with the Durga Puja festival. The research itself, from British Council's perspective, has been innovative in more senses than one. Certainly, I can think of two axes why it's been innovative. And my colleague, Jonathan Kennedy, who's Director of Arts for India, will get into one such in some detail. The first innovative axis is the focus on creative economy on what is essentially a religious festival. And then, as I mentioned, for British Council to turn its lenses on what is essentially a faith-based festival has been quite an innovative approach. And we had to overcome some internal challenges and headwinds around that. So I'll talk about this research, which from both from a perspective of diversity as well as collaboration. And I think all these elements are related, and there are strong intersectionalities involved in these terms that we have been using. So I think the twin lenses of diversity and collaboration, I think one complements the other. So just to give you a quick look, this is what the research looks like. There's a cover page, and I think the image is important. I'll get into this image, especially for participants who are not familiar with this particular festival. Durga Puja festival is a Hindu festival, largely it's celebrated all across India in various forms, but the epicenter of this festival is in West Bengal, particularly Kolkata, which is the capital city and one of the sort of imperial seats of the British Empire, as it were. And it's a 10-day festival, attracts hundreds and thousands, well, millions of visitors from across India, and increasingly getting more and more international attention. We commissioned this research in 2019, and this established that the creative economy worth of the festival is around $4.53 billion US. This is from a 10-day festival, and contributing about 3% of the state's GDP. In terms of collaboration, we had a number of direct collaborators, primarily the government of West Bengal. The Chief Minister's office had a particular role in initiating this research with the British Council, and then subsequently taken up by the Departments of Tourism and Information and Cultural Affairs. The primary research was led by Queen Mary University of London. They are experts in this approach of creative economy research into festivals. And they partnered with one of India's top technological universities, Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. And it's interesting why Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur was chosen. The reason behind this was that the West Bengal government mandated us that this research shouldn't be just a UK university parachuting into West Bengal and creating this research and then going away. So there was an element of capacity building involved, and there was a clear mandate from the government to get this research done in partnership with a university or a body based out of West Bengal. And subsequently, another company came into the picture, SmartCube, which is a data analytics and research company. In terms of indirect collaboration, we had a number of other partners, especially very large format festival organizers, Durga Puja organizers. Some of them need to be name checked here. Aheri Tola Sarbojonin, Bhabanipur Pochattur Polli, and Baliganj Cultural. They have been really instrumental, these three big pujas. And connecting with the UK, we had the Bengal Heritage Foundation and London Sharad Utsav, who then connected the research and our narrative to a number of other cities in the UK with significant Bengali diaspora. And we also collaborated indirectly with a brilliant social enterprise in arts and culture called Bangla Natok, who are our partners in the creative economy field, and Kolkata Center for Creativity, and many others. I'm just naming a couple of them. The story around which the Durga Puja festival takes place is interesting, because in terms of the metapoia that it refers to, it celebrates the mother goddess and female power. And at a very basic, iconic level, it is about the triumph of a triumph over patriarchy. The 10 arms of the goddess, I think, again represents a wide range of human capability. The actual practice of the festival has lots of diversity elements. The soil for the idols are made out of clay, and the first lump of soil comes from the doorstep of a sex worker. And I think in terms of the large format Durga Pujas that's celebrated across Calcutta, I mean, it's really cuts across faith lines. So the Muslim mayor of Kolkata is the chief organizers of one of the largest Durga Pujas of the city. And I think going back to the recommendations of this report, I think the number of axes around which diversity is important and inclusion is important. Right on top is the fact that though it celebrates the female goddess, the gender inclusion, especially inclusion of women in large format Durga Pujas and decision making, is very poor. So one of the recommendations is to address that. Access to differently abled people and to visitors to the city who are not familiar with Kolkata is very difficult. It's an incredibly crowded festival. So I think this physical access is one of the recommendations. One of the recommendations talks about greater participation of the non-political civil society organizations. There is a recommendation around recognition of marginalized sections for the arts and craft sector in terms of visibility, and tracking of remittances of migrant workers, both domestic and international. So as you can see, I mean, this is a research report that looks at a festival through multiple lenses. There are 10 creative industries that have been mapped, and we are still scratching at the surface in terms of how complex the whole festival is. I think in the interest of time, I'll stop here. And again, a very big thank you to all the organizers for inviting us and me to this platform. It's been a real learning experience for me. Thank you.
I think that was absolutely fascinating. If I'm going to take one thing away from there for sure, is that collaboration, and perhaps also something that we say, that collaboration really needs a very large set of different stakeholders if you want to do something at scale, and understanding, you know, an ecosystem to be able to actually bring about that innovation. I don't know, Dave, what do you think? Because this is like a very concrete example on the ground of how multi-stakeholder groups can come together.
I agree. And this is it's a subject that attracts, in Bengal at least, it gets everybody's attention. And if you can highlight something like this, it's such a win. It's such a feather on the cap of the effort made by British Council and the effort towards diversity. There's no question. And examples like this must be replicated in different ways, and doesn't have to be religious festivals. This could be addressing the issues that Hadija is trying to address, and which, in multiple forums in India, the problem of unemployment, for instance, 50 million people are unemployed today. So that's the nature of the challenge in this country. And what can we do without being absolutely, audaciously innovative? And for that, what is the option but to be diverse? And like I was saying, diversity will not happen by mandate. Each one of us will have to believe that diversity is really good and open our minds to the possibility of hearing different things, different ideas, and people in different backgrounds coming in, joining the workforce to begin with, and see what that results in. And we have done a lot of experiment in Aditya Birla Group of bringing in diversity, and perforce it has happened, because we're in large acquisitions across the world, and quite surprisingly, when we had our annual get together 4 years ago, we weren't sure we were in India or somewhere else, and that's what you find that quite accidentally this has happened, that our whole management team has got become multi-ethnic, multi-regional, multi-country, and it has led to a very different perspective of even a simple thing like somebody tells me my son-in-laws are British and French, and then they say, your entire portfolio is just investments in India? Really? It's one of the really high beta countries. Are you sure that's the only investment you want to do in your life? I never thought about that. I thought India was, India gave its variety of options for me to be, either completely safe or, run the risk of ruining myself. So those options are available in India. Is it really, as a person looking out from outside, you should have only 20% of your investment in that and 80% somewhere else? And quite surprisingly, in Aditya Birla Group, this has actually happened. And it has led to a very different perspective of what we can really do with what we have, and what should we, and the audacity of thinking, the largeness of the canvas, the perspective changes that we have had by virtue of this diversity is unexplainable. We would have never even have thought of doing things like this. And I don't want to go into examples, but Devanjan, thank you very much for a wonderful, really heart-touching, actually, experience that you have converted into a research study. Yeah, Karen, over to you. Who else would you like to bring in?
From the Durga Puja festival, okay, we are now going to go to space, in Hong Kong. So I'm going to request Perry Lam, the Vice Chair of OASA Academy in Hong Kong, to really talk a little bit about innovation and diversity, especially with respect to the students, and then of course the industry in itself. I think is amazing. So yes, Perry, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen, for inviting us today and the organizers. This is our first time being part of RISE. If you would have invited us last year, quite frankly, we wouldn't have been able to attend because we're just coming on 1 year of age. So we're a startup as well as an accelerator, as well as an NGO, focusing in on really leveraging, I think, the diversity from the perspective of capabilities within not only the workplace, but more importantly, within the education stream as such. So people ask, how do we get started? Well, almost a year ago, we had a webinar, and there was a astronaut trained out of NASA, Chris Altman. There was a serial investor, Jay Jung, as well as also an academic who was Quentin Parker, Professor Quentin Partner of the Laboratory of Space Research. And during that webinar, our focus is really raising the awareness of the space economy. Most people think the space economy, what is that? Is it just about rocket ships? Is it about now we see about space tourism with Bezos, with Elon Musk, and also with Richard Branson? But it's much more than that. And in reality, it's here now. Think for a moment, look around us. There's big data, 5G, smart cities, Hong Kong being a financial capital, timestamps on each one of the financial documents per se and transactions that go on. That's all focused in on data and communications. But if you ask a student in Hong Kong, what would you like to do in your career? Chances are the first three answers would be, I'd like to be a banker. I'd like to be a lawyer, or I'd like to be a doctor, yes? But what we would like to introduce is think about the future of today of entrepreneurship. And what is entrepreneurship? It's looking at astronauts as well as entrepreneurships and coming together entrepreneurships and how we could be prepared to empower as well as enable the workforce of today to be the leaders of tomorrow in the areas of the space economy. So one example of that is if you look at how much the space economy has grown, people not realize it, but some of the studies that have gone on with the Bryce Tech says that in 2020, $447 billion is contributed in terms of the space economy. 10 years ago, it was half that. And also startups, SMEs, they contribute to as much as 500 million in year 2020 as such. So the opportunity is vast. The awareness, we say, is the opportunity for us to help educate those within initially Hong Kong and then through today, sharing with those at the RISE Summit in terms of the opportunities. Now, more specifically, capabilities. Our beliefs are that we should not leave anyone behind. So in terms of diversity, we work anywhere from kindergartens who have some learning challenges up through the high school or grades 10, 11, 12, who are more on the vocational track versus the academic track. And then finally, high flying corporate executives. So you can see the diversity there in terms of the opportunities that we are really promoting of developing and empowering the workforce as such. And how do we do that? We have a number of initiatives that we've kicked off in the last year. One of them, which I'd like to share with you now, was called Mission Stargate. And it was developed with our project director, Thomas Wang, but more importantly, our executive chair, Greg Lee. And the focus is bringing in students. And we're talking about diverse students in the sense that they come from different schools. This last round we had were 52 of them from roughly 14 schools. And they would come together and work as teams. And we would give them the exposure in terms of some of the key challenges that they would work on. So very much as I've heard with action learning, very much experiential, understanding the opportunities within the space economy. And then we have them into a competition in which they've got to present their findings. So it's all results oriented. So diversity, the key to that really, as we see it, as being able to deliver the results. So the business case, they need to present. They need to incorporate some influencing without authority. They've got to do some public speaking, so they pick up some life skills. But more importantly, they come together to gain a great awareness in terms of the future opportunities and careers within the space economy. And that is Mission Stargate. In fact, we're actually looking at putting this online in a few months' time and being able to make that available to other entities in terms of a license agreement. So we're trying to really cascade this and spread this in an exponential manner per se. We have another program in terms of capabilities called Young Marco Polos. Those of us who are history buffs will recognize young Marco Polo coming into China from Europe, bringing back to Europe innovations such as gunpowder, fireworks, silk per se. But in this case, what we're doing is working with young high flyers at corporate level. And they come in with what we call a wicked problem. So there are teams of them who all come together under one roof. It could be anywhere from 4 to 6 teams, and they each have their own company challenge or wicked problem. And they go through a series of business canvas. They go through a series of really helping them reframe and defining what the real issues are and coming up with a deliverable in which they present and pitch back to their management. So we look at this as a lab, if not as a leadership development opportunity per se. So These are just some examples of what we're working on at OASA. OASA is the Orion, which is the brightest star in the universe, entrepreneurship, space economy. So with that, what I'd like to do is that we have a host of different programs. I will put on the chat line our website. I would encourage everyone, please come visit the website, contact us, and we'd be happy to create a dialogue, maybe looking at some opportunities in terms of collaboration further down the road now. But the key to it, as we see, is firstly, diversity with deliverables, incorporating innovation and looking at today's new space economy, which is all around us. We just need to be aware of it and then embrace it and move forward in terms of some deliverables.
Great.
So with that, Karen, I'd like to turn it back over to you. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you so very much, Perry. And you really set the stage for the next segment because you spoke the word collaboration, yeah? And I really want to now start pushing everybody. We just have half an hour to go and we really need to want to look at what's the way forward. So let's start asking for something, you know? I think we've been all telling and talking and giving definitely, but let's ask as well. What is it that you're looking for that you would want to take forward in your work, and how would that really look like if you looked at opportunities for partnership when you were working with somebody else? So maybe, you know, start talking from that point of view, as well as thinking, even those who have already spoken, may I encourage you to put it on the chat. If you're looking for something specific, do you have something going on with your programs where there is a gap, where there is a need, where you want to bring in something new? Please bring this in now, because this is the time when we can start looking and talking about collaborations in specific, yeah? Some of you have, of course, mentioned it while you have spoken about your work, but let's get out a little more specific and, you know, make sure that we try to pick up on those and not lose out on them in any way. And maybe whoever can offer or say, yes, this sounds interesting, I want to be a part of it, or maybe I can get in touch with you post the session. I think that'll be even a better outcome from this. But at least let's put it on the table that this is where our gaps are, or this is where we are looking for collaboration, as well as you know, alliances, knowledge, resources, models, framework, whatever it might be that you're looking for. Now's the time to put it on the table, yeah? And with that, I think, Anupama, who would you like to kind of bring in now to
Yeah, I was thinking of that. So from space, I thought we'll go to Sarita, for you know, who's building communities as a part of a social enterprise, and how she uses innovation for her work to impact people on the ground.
Great, awesome.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Anupama. Really excited to be here. And I think this forum is a huge celebration of diversity, having people from 100 countries talk in one forum across time zones and address the world of diversity from where we are. So it's basically about thinking global, but acting local, and that's very important. So with that in mind, want to talk about the work we do at Aurora. And Aurora has been looking at climate change as a problem, and on how to build sustainable communities within these different regions. And one of the things we have done is we have employed women in climate change affected areas in India and looked at providing employment for women in the clean energy space. Clean energy itself is a very male dominated industry, but we've been trying to bring more opportunities for women and youth so that they can fight the problem of climate change. And as we look at that, we've seen that we've built an ecosystem there for women to survive in climate change affected areas. They now have learned electronics and they produce solar products to survive. But that's the problem from one part of India. But if you look at the same problem of climate change from where I sit now in the US, it's different. There's a need for innovation in reducing carbon emissions. And what I'm seeing is there's a huge connect between how people sitting in the US can actually impact people sitting in India with climate change. With this whole carbon emission reduction, there's there's an innovation happening in each of these industries, and we can connect with each other. Like the whole carbon trading industry is coming up in the US, which wants to contribute to development of India and things like that. So we are basically opening up this forum of clean energy and diversity to the whole crowd, like to the global forum. And we're inviting people from across the globe to join in on our clean innovation. Last year, we were part of the summit, and we committed to starting a sustainability roundtable last year. And we've starting this year. So you can go to our website and find a way to contribute to diversity in clean energy. And I would be glad to have students and other corporates and governments be part of this mission of fighting climate change in different countries across the world. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Sarita. At this stage now, I'd like to ask Shreya, who's here from Jindal Steelworks, and who can share with us her experiences of collaborations on diversity and innovation.
Hi, thanks a lot, Anupama, and firstly, fabulous panel, and hello to all the participants. A lot of great stories and research work that I've heard here. Very interesting. Thank you for that. I have spent quite a bit of time in the diversity and inclusion space in the corporate India world. What I realize is that though, and of course the topic is this, about diversity and innovation, I really believe that, cognitive diversity is the key for innovation. I think all of us have already spoken about it. However, diversity is not the only requirement for us to be able to innovate and be successful. And I think Ellen has already shared that. Now, what I feel is, how do we create this inclusive workspace? A lot of organizations, in my mind, are still doing the, the tick mark exercise of probably just bringing in diversity. And then the people who work with each other really don't know how to be inclusive to each other. And it's really not their fault. And I think it was discussed earlier, human beings actually associate themselves to people. They feel they have some sort of familiarity, or they know, or the background is similar. So if we are naturally tuned to be with people like us, how do we make our corporate organizations inclusive? And I think that is what I have seen as a challenge in many of the organizations that I interact with or work with. And honestly, I don't really blame employees. I think it doesn't come naturally. And sometimes when things are working right, you don't want to question the status quo. You really don't understand it. So I think what I have experienced in terms of collaboration is that an organization has to have, firstly, the leadership buy-in. So the top-down approach is very important. I'm sure you've heard of this, but they are the ones who will actually be the push factor here. And how do you create the pull factor? Now, I think a lot of examples we've heard, and there are actually many more, which talks about products and services that failed in the marketplace just because they could not identify the need of the target that they were actually trying to get to. And this really happened because their team, or their innovation team, or the product design team really did not have the diversity that they were trying to target. So I think the business case is quite clear. What we now need to do is really to be able to help managers. And I think people work with managers. When we talk about a work space, we are actually talking about the manager and their team specifically. So how do we create that inclusive space for everybody in this environment? I started with collaboration with leaders. I think you have to have their buy-in, you have to have their sponsorship. We need to then move to how do we empower managers, line managers who are actually working with people. And to do that, you really have to understand what are the challenges. And the whole point is that sometimes we get so busy to be inclusive, we don't realize what is required. And this is where I think a lot of our external partners can support. There are a lot of organizations that work in the inclusive diversity and inclusion space. And I think they come up with some great ideas of how we can create equity. And, everybody doesn't come from the same background. Somebody has the privilege and somebody doesn't. And giving them the same opportunities sometimes doesn't work. And even the motivation, sometimes we feel that, okay, maybe a promotion is a motivation at the workplace. So let us, create that environment where women or men and genders and other diversities would actually jump at that opportunity and push themselves or motivate themselves. But like I said, for everything, I think we need to understand how to make it equitable. And once we understand that, we need to empower the managers. I think that's where the internal collaboration works with an external collaboration. We also need to work with HR to understand how recruitment works. How do we encourage diversity to come and join? How do we encourage line managers to look at diversity as somebody that they would like to recruit? And a lot of this also has to take care of the micro inequities in the workplace. How do you even identify it? How do you even know that somebody's actually getting a micro advantage in their career, whereas somebody is actually getting that the opposite side of that, where they are kind of getting pulled down or they don't feel motivated enough. So I think it is a lot of work, but I think there are a lot of people engaged in this work. Unless you collaborate, it is not possible. There are a lot of organizations that are benchmarking. There are a lot of organizations that are doing some excellent research. I think all of this has to be in some way integrated with a corporate environment where we can actually support people to become inclusive, to actually understand how to become inclusive and create this equitable opportunities for various diversity. So I think collaboration at multiple levels will actually help the diversity that you want to bring in or you already have to actually become innovative, because otherwise they will not have an opportunity to even share their innovative ideas or practices. They won't have a voice. So I think that's what I feel.
Yeah, I think that's very, very pertinent what you shared. Truly, without inclusion, you can't have innovation either. So yes, while we want to move away from diversity and inclusion to diversity and innovation, we must subsume the meaning of inclusion within our definition of diversity so that we can actually truly innovate. At this stage of the session, Karen, I'd like to hand over to you to invite, for the closing, please.
One of the biggest problems, I think, with the word innovation is we tend to either associate it with a product or we associate it with a person, right? And unfortunately, when we do that, we really limit our thinking to what can be more innovative or what else can we innovate with. And one of the definitions I learned when I was at Oxford was, and this was a long conversation with the professor there, was that as I said, everything we talk about is that it's the end result. The product that is seen as an innovative process, is an innovation, right? Or if you see that you have hired, different backgrounds, then you say that's innovative. But that, for me, innovation is not the end product, honestly. And that's where the long conversation is all about, right? It's really, really about the process that leads you to be innovative, right? And that process is that incremental steps, at every stage, that makes you kind of question yourself. Am I thinking the right way? Am I working the right way? What if I did this differently? And we actually have this in our office when you enter, is a what more, how else? I mean, we are constantly challenging our team to always think these two questions and ask themselves. And what I have realized is, by asking that question, we've actually been able to change the final product. But it is the final product that is seen and always looked at as innovative, rather than the process that led us to that. So for me, honestly, at a personal level, it's the process innovation that fascinates me even more. Beyond that, what is the final product that comes out? Because I feel that's just the end result. And similarly, it is, I think, with hiring, because we've spoken a lot about this over here. Hiring is just, the starting point of one action. What is the result of hiring a diverse workforce? Is the innovation that will create the business case for people to do it a lot more. And, I would have loved, we don't have much time, unfortunately, but I would have loved to get that insight, from people like Govind, Deborah. Deborah I know her work is so much in making people change the way they think, and process innovation comes from that. It's at every step of the way, how do you change your thinking? And I would love to get that. But as I said, it doesn't end here. The idea of the RISE Summit is to start a conversation, and then, of course, follow it up with sectoral, regional kind of conversations that hopefully will lead to alliances and projects on the ground. So I'm looking forward to that. And again, I'm just kind of making you start thinking along those lines: is what more, how else can we leverage what we're doing right now? Because this process can become more innovative if we ask ourselves that question. If we don't ask that question, it will just be another discussion that we've all had, and obviously, not have any outcomes that we can take forward. And talking of outcomes and scale, because again, process innovation, I think I want to bring in an example that I'm very impressed with, and that is the CSRN, the COVID Student Response Network, which is now in the short form, but started during COVID. And Philip Black, who is one of the directors and leaders of that network, put together completely by students, simply amazing. And again, they have scaled so rapidly, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, Philip, but they have scaled so rapidly because of exactly process. If your processes are in place, it can change the end result of what you do. So, Philip, may I request you to come in and maybe share a little bit of the amazing work that you all are doing and how it got started. I hope Philip's
Yes,
there.
thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, indeed. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you very much for the introduction, Karen. I'm very flattered. So hi everyone. Great to meet you all, and great to hear the kind of story so far. So I'm Philip. I'm a director of CSRN. We are a global student consultancy set up to tackle social impact, create social impact projects in regions of crisis. We were set up in the wake of the first lockdown because we saw a lot of different, all came from consultancy backgrounds from our universities, which were across the UK initially. And, we were able to kind of move these projects to go virtually. And we had great success with them. We ran our first round of projects for, I think it was about 75 charities in the UK with 16 different universities. As well from the UK, and we found to have great success with that. It worked very well remotely. It was manageable for students while also giving them experience and exposure to kind of the social impact sector as well, and the kind of difference and changes that they can have even when working from home. Shortly after the first round, the Beirut blast incident occurred, and we kind of felt compelled to bring our services across the water and to a more global scale. And so we began outreach to charities within Lebanon. And initially, we weren't actually that kind of successful because it was only students from the UK doing this outreach. And this is when I suppose the point of diversity and innovation really starts to come into play for us. We realized we needed students on the ground in Lebanon who understood the crisis, who understood its impact, and who had the connections as well to kind of start outreaching to the charity. So we were able to kind of onboard, we were able to reach out to different students within the network. American University Beirut were very kind of responsive to us, and we worked off other kind of global student networks as well to identify on the ground ambassadors and mobilize the team within a quite short space of time. And from that, we've had massive success. We've been able to run over 80 projects within Lebanon now, and then replicate that model across other regions. So we next moved into India, where I think we're coming up on the 70 kind of mark of projects, and have also been able to work within Africa, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So we've done a very much region-based model to date, working in areas of crisis, but we're actually changing that now to tackle climate change as our next kind of cause as we move into our next round of 50 projects. So we really did find the diversity and innovation kind of piece to be key to how we operate, and having students on the ground and in those different kind of regions was crucial to our acquisitions effort as well. In terms of then also kind of diversity and inclusion and innovation, the youth-led kind of aspect, as Karen said, we're an entirely student-led and kind of recent graduate-led organisation. And so whenever we meet with charities, we have sometimes had those credentials questioned as well, because they're like, what can you offer us? If some of you haven't even finished university yet. And we've been able to come in now with a great kind of bank of assets and proven kind of success stories as well, and show you the real value that I think youth can kind of make as well. And it's great for the youth as well in terms of exposure to the leadership of these organizations, to see the work they're doing on the ground and kind of hear some of the inspiring stories as well. And we've kind of had great feedback as well from the students and the value that they've had in working with these leaders. Now, of course, as an organization that's entirely youth-led, we did realize at the point that we do need to kind of set up and get some more experienced kind of inputs and voices. And so we set up a kind of advisory board for our organization across 7 key areas of the kind of the charity business as well, that we need to input and steer on. And I think that's something that often isn't seen. I think people question that with youth leadership. They think they're off to do it on their own. They're going to go do what they want and try and change everything. But from what I've seen and from the people that I've worked with, we really do appreciate the kind of the steer from those kind of with experience, who have kind of lived and learned those lessons as well, and find that invaluable. Fortunately, from that work, I was able to then get involved in One Young World, which is a global youth leadership summit and forum. And from that, there is delegates from, I think, 190 countries who convene at an annual summit as well. And I've been able to meet some incredible people through that organization from very, very different backgrounds. So my kind of background came from youth leadership, ethical leadership, and then kind of support for the social impact sector. Whereas there's others in there who are focused on health equity, who are kind of focused on social work and conflict resolution and things like that. And it's been amazing to kind of hear about their experiences as well, and how they've taken ownership and just, I suppose, took the leap as well in the youth kind of space as well, and been able to demonstrate some real value. So I think it's incredible to see something like this, where people have talked about diversity and how important it is, and how youth inclusion is really driving the way forward.
Thank you so much, Philip. And tell me again, and everybody again, in how many months did you set up the initial setup?
So we are now going into 18 months since we founded CSRN, and we've been able to work with about 300 charities, which has been pretty incredible.
Wow. Yeah, just 18 months. And you can understand why I am a big fan of CSRN, right? So thank you very much, Philip, for joining us. And of course, we look forward to continue working with you. So we are coming to the end of our time together, at least at the Rise World Summit in this particular roundtable. But there's a lot that is happening, and I'm sure we will continue to connect and talk further. I'm going to quickly ask Jonathan. He has been losing the electricity. Delhi is really struggling today, because since morning, starting with the the plenary with UNICEF, they've been having an issue. So Jonathan, I'm going to ask you, before we lose you once again, if you could please come in and talk a little bit about and your article. I must tell you, that was phenomenal. I think we need to put that link, if you don't mind, in the chat box, because I'm sure people would love to read that, and give such a comprehensive view about innovation and yet talking about diversity. So it was like just absolutely, spot on. So go ahead, Jonathan. Just waiting to hear from you.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks to everybody for bearing with me. Hopefully, my Wi-Fi will last out the rest of my my quick talk now. And what an amazing conversation! I've made most of it, but just missed the last 20 minutes or so, I think. And if we think sort of slightly more broadly about our work at British Council, which is in around 110 countries across the world. So diversity is in the nature of the DNA of the organization, by how we have to operate and adapt and respond to our different contexts. And our work across all our programs in arts and education and English is really rooted in our values around equality, diversity and inclusion. And I think that equality word is also very important. It's not just around the diversity of the voices, but it's also about the equality of those being heard. And for me and for British Council, I think being seen and being heard are both equally important. Whether that's around age or ethnicity or gender or LGBTQI or differently abled or socioeconomic or nationality, all of these factors are really important in terms of what we do in our arts and education work. We've talked a lot, I think, about the policy and implementation, but actually there are two really simple things. It comes from the head and it comes from the heart. And if you have one is missing, you can't implement the other. So you have to really mean it and implement it. And our research is our background to underpin the head and the heart in our work in the arts at British Council. And I think the things are not immutable. Diversity and quality come together. And for me, you can't have the quality of innovation without the diversity. If they're seen as separate, you're already lost. Because in the dialogue, in the discussion, in the understanding, and in the empathy comes the innovation. And if you have blocks to those things, then you can't progress. It's about the challenge that comes in that. And I think Debanjan touched upon it from our internal conversations around the Durga Puja research, ostensibly a faith-based mythological festival, but actually on the ground, artists, artisans, designers, businesses, lighting designers are all part of the festival. So in that festival, in that piece of research, comes that sense of how we think of our diversity across our program. And from my background before British Council in theatre, it comes from governance and leadership. Those people who are representing diversity will make the difference. Those leaders will make the difference. And it then comes through in terms of the stories that they tell, the artists that they work with, and the audiences and the participants with whom they engage as well. So I think for me, all of these things are holistic. They're not separate from one and the other. And just thinking about our research that we've been doing in the past couple of years around, it's called Taking the Temperature. And it looks at all of the creative economy in India, the different sectors, crafts, festivals, publishing, literature, advertising, broadcast, all of these segments are part of the diversity, business-wise, of India's GDP and its creative economy. And in the main, 88% of the sector are micro and small and mid-scale. And that micro and mid-scale, that is the lifeblood of the future. They will be the innovators. They will be the ones, the big beasts who will run government and run organizations, right, institutions in the longer term. And if that micro and small scale isn't diverse from the outset, then it feeds through in terms of those other parts of the sector and the wider creative economy. So I think these integral elements of diversity are really important. And our work in the UK and globally in creative economy is informed by some of the pioneers of this work from 1990s, when DCMS was first founded, DCMS, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. and it segmented different parts of the economy: broadcasting, publishing and advertising, theatre, performing arts, museums. And in these segments, it is now understood the mapping of this, and that informs how the government thinks of its policy and its investment, and the diversity of the investment, and those artists who are supported through the investment of the taxpayers' money. Essentially, all you take taxpayers' money is being fed back to feed the economy and to feed the artists and organizations who then generate a tax gain which comes back into the economy. So the diversity of voices, of representation, of organizations, of artists, of innovation, to me, it's all the same. And if they're split off, you really cut off your left arm.
Wow.
But the absolute virtue and value is in diversity. It is not separate. It is absolutely part of the lifeblood of innovation in the arts and in all businesses.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That passion, oh my goodness, thank you. I think the key absolutely is that it is all linked, and as you said, it's about governance, it's about policy, it's about getting the right kind of messaging right from the top, because otherwise it's not going to work no matter what you put into place, right? It's what you say right from the top. So thank you very much in giving that really holistic, it's end to end. It's not about bits and pieces, but really making sure that you look at the entire ecosystem, and then of course all the different actors in it. We are going to have to close. It's already actually 7:30, which means we're going to step just a little bit beyond our time. I do hope you all can spare with us just another 5 minutes more, because I do, like Jonathan just spoke about governance. I want to bring Govind back in to kind of close this up to say, what does it take when you are at the leadership level, right? You've heard Govind, the kind of challenges people talk about, the kind of capabilities and programs and wonderful interventions that people are doing. But ultimately, as a way forward, what is it that it would take to really make things work at a larger scale? Things might work in small bits and pieces, but how do we, as Jonathan rightly said just now, how do we really make it work at an ecosystem level so that the economy is a rolling economy, and therefore innovation then becomes, the business case for innovation is no longer anything but diversity. Yeah.
Well, I think I try to keep it short. I think that particular train has already left the station. I think, like Mr. Bhattacharya pointed out, if a group of the scale of the Birla Group has benefited so much from the overseas acquisitions that is done, as he pointed out, there's a lot that they have learned from some of their acquisitions. I was in fact going to mention earlier that the Tatas have been big acquirers outside India, and in many areas, particularly to do with safety, quality, and so on, I think these have been critical. The diversity that comes from different people from different backgrounds has been important, I think, in growth of an organization of that size. Importantly, there are entire businesses I think the Tata Group might not be in today if it hadn't done these overseas acquisitions and got those kinds of employees into its fold. I think I love the bit that Phil as well as Debanjan gave two very different examples from different sort of literally parts of the world. The Durga Puja, which is clearly comes from I think the combined passion of different groups of people, as well as the example that was given about the space program. But let me address your question. Jonathan really gave the answer in short, which is, he said leadership is at the heart of all of this. Now, at one level and at a sort of philosophical level, this is part of a change in the way organizations were run. 40 years ago, a few senior people, usually who looked a lot like each other and spoke like each other, decided what to do and told everyone else to, how to run companies or other organizations, and everyone else kind of listened and just followed. Things have changed. I mean, I referred earlier to the general democratization of organizations. And there are basic skill sets which now people who work in organizations need to have. They need to listen to what others are trying to tell them. They need to sort of engage more with others. So, ever more sort of interpersonal skills are not just living in an echo chamber and, talking to people who you like to hear and, who are just like you. And companies and other, organizations are insisting that they hire people who have those kinds of skills. People are realizing that, combating of stereotypes is extremely important. And I think both Ellen and Hadia pointed out how there is enough evidence of much better investor return, consumer offtake, etc. When you have essentially outcomes just tend to be better with diverse teams. We've seen through examples like the global financial crisis that blind spots get prevented, if you have diverse groups of people. So I think, like I was mentioning earlier, there is widespread acceptance now of diversity. What is sometimes missing is the drive at the top. So you will see that companies where CEOs or where the C-suite kind of is pushing for it, these things happen a lot faster. Having said which, we have enough examples of success. I mean, I think Tata's have tried very hard in India. I know Diageo, for instance, as a UK consumer products company, has done very well. Unilever has worked extremely hard on this. So, there are a number of large organizations who have done this. So I think the template is there. It's just for, people like us and, organizations like this to sort of just get the word out more. But I think we are, maybe a couple of years away from this being a no choice question for most organizations. So I'll leave it at that. And, thank you, Karan, for a super sort of event, and thank you everyone else.
Thank you so very much, Govind. Really appreciate that final connecting of the dots with you and Jonathan. I think that was quite amazing close. I'm sorry, I know I wish I could bring in many more people who could have come in, but I hope you had a chance to use the chat box to get a voice and share your thoughts with all of us. There will be a report on this, and as I keep mentioning over and over again, I hope that many of us will keep connecting with each other. It doesn't have to be through us, but definitely keep the lines open for communication. And just before we close, just a little bit of housekeeping. As you know, we talk about the SDGs. The whole event is focused on the SDGs. And so we just want to challenge each one of you that when you think about the subject, when you work on your programs, when you design anything new that you're going to work on, then please do look at the SDGs, not as these 17 blocks. Because I think this is the view we always see, right? But the view that we see, and we'd like you to start thinking about, is really this woolen ball with 17 colors of threads tightly worn out. That really could be the way it really is, because issues are not standalone issues, and so that is where the innovation starts coming in. When we are looking at multiple constraints and trying to resolve it, I think that's the sweet spot of getting innovations out the door. And so we challenge you all to please think about the SDGs, work on them, work across them, and find solutions that will help us finally meet all of them and leave no one behind.